Hi, my name is Magdalena, and in front of me I have my first ever GlamShop cosmetics order. I thought it would be fun to do a little bit of a first impressions. I have played with these a bit on my eye, do some swatches, talk about them, talk about what it was like ordering them, talk about the formulas and that kind of thing. So my order included these 9 singles, this digital lavender quad, the neon mattes, and the grunge palette. I'm going to be going through these, doing the reviews and swatches in just a second, but first I wanted to point out the palettes here. Although the pans are magnetic, the palette itself is not, and the pans are glued in. So if you, like me, purchase these to use as singles, you're going to have to, warm up the glue and destroy the palette. Second off, I just wanted to point out that this is a Polish brand. They do have free international shipping events, which is what I took advantage of, and they are quite affordable, so I do think it is worth it, but they are going to be a little more expensive if you're someone outside of the European Union. The first group that I have here are the singles I picked up. I picked up 4 of the Turbo Glow pigments and 5 of their Multichromes. First up is the Turbo Glow Pigment Snowball. This one is an iridescent that shifts turquoise, blue, indigo, purple, with blue and pink micro sparkles throughout it. It's got a smaller particle size, but it's still quite sparkly. And the formula is a balanced creamy formula. It's not oily or squishy, but it is definitely creamy. I did wear test this one, however, I was wearing it in my inner corner, so I didn't get to see the level of crease that it might have on the center of my eyelid, but it wore quite well, and I think I wore it for about 4 or 5 hours before I started to notice any fading. Next up is another Turbo Glow pigment. This is called Bling. It's an iridescent gold, green, turquoise blue. It really has the same formula as the previous one, that kind of balanced creamy formula, relatively small particle size, but very sparkly. Like the last shade, I did also do a wear test on this one. However, I wore this one a little bit more on my lid. I didn't notice any profound creasing. I do tend to notice creasing by the end of the day with any shadow. However, this was no more than I've seen in any other shadow. Next is another Turbo Glow pigment, and I really feel like, at least so far, these have the same formula across the board and the same finish. Smaller particle size, but very sparkly, a creamy but stable formulation. This one is called Celtic, and it has a dove gray base and shifts cyan, blue, indigo, and purple. I really like this shadow. It's kind of been the surprise hit out of this for me. I just find these kind of cool tone blue browns to be so flattering, and I wish I'd gotten into them earlier. I've worn it twice now, and both times it lasted well on my eye. I would say it's about the same as a formula like Cleona. Doesn't last as well as, say, Shine by SD or Pretties for Your Face, but it still lasts quite well. The last Turbo Glow pigment is Laser. This has a soft rose brown base and shifts green, blue, purple, and pink. This is the same formula as the others, the small particle size, the stable creamy formula. I picked this one up because it's a dupe of Cleona Cephalopod, which is not sold as a single. It's only in the Deep Sea Treasures palette, and it's my favorite shadow from that palette. I'm very close to hitting pan, so I needed to get another version of it. I wore this at the same time as Cephalopod. By the end of the day, I couldn't remember which eye was which, but they looked identical. So I would say it's definitely a dupe. Formula-wise, it's a dupe. Color-wise, it's a dupe. And I'm really, really happy about that because I love Cephalopod. First up for the Multichromes is the shade Ballet. Now, I definitely have a fair amount of dupes for this. This is a pretty standard shade. It's got a blue base with magenta, orange, yellow, and green shifts. I don't see a huge difference between the formulas of the Turbo Glow and this particular Multichrome. They both have the smaller particle size, they're a bit sparkly. Maybe I would say this is a little bit more opaque and has a little bit more pigment to the base, but otherwise the formula is pretty similar. Next is Virtual Pink. This is a very popular shade of theirs. It has a peachy pink base and shifts cyan, blue, indigo, and purple. It has a very flaky finish in the pan, however it does smooth out to a nice foiled sparkly finish. The formula is that really oily, sticky, creamy formula, which I hate. That creases almost immediately on me and it just feels unpleasant. I have tried to push out the extra oil using the kind of like tissue paper trick, and that definitely helped. However, I don't think I'll be wearing this shadow out of the house. I'll just be using it for creative looks that I post because it's not going to last very long on my eyelids. So fair warning to anyone looking to buy this, this is one of those like really oily, unpleasant formulas. The next multichrome is the shade Crazy. This has a deep purple base with purple, pink, gold, green shifts. It's less shifty than the other multichromes, but it's very vibrant and very pigmented. It has a small particle size, but where the other ones have still a bit of sparkle to them, this one is definitely more metallic. Of course, I had to wear this one right away, and it wore quite well. It has the same formula that Ballet had and that the Turbo Glow pigments have, and that it's more of a balanced creamy shade. It's not that gross, weeping, oily one like Virtual Pink. Next is Multi Unicorn. This has a purple base with pink, peach, gold, green, cyan shifts. Very similar to Ballet in formula. It has that small particle size with a bit of sparkle to it. And again, it's just a nice creamy balanced formula. I have worn this one, not for as long, just for about an hour or so, but it wore quite well during that time. And the last multichrome I picked up is It's a Hit. This has a cool purple base and shifts rose gold, gold, green, cyan. It has a very flaky formula in the pan, but it does smooth out to a foiled sparkly finish. It's similar in a sense to Virtual Pink in that it is definitely creamy and a little bit oily, however not as extreme, and once I pressed all that extra binder out, it actually worked pretty good. Not as good as the others, but it still wore fine on me for about 4 hours until I started to get some creasing, which is pretty good. I'm very susceptible to creasing. I absolutely love this kind of color. This is my favorite kind of color. To be honest, if it wasn't my favorite kind of color, I might be less impressed with it. I might be less willing to deal with that creasing, but I really, really love this color. So at least for now, I'm willing to deal with it. First up for the palettes, I have the Digital Lavender Quad. They make a bunch of these different little curated quads, which I think are based on a previously released shadow, but I don't really know which shadow that is because none of these came labeled. The first shade in the quad is a multichrome with a pink, gold, and lime shift and a black base full of gold and green sparkles. It's extremely flaky and extremely sparkly and definitely needs to be used with a glitter glue. Next is a metallic duochrome that shifts cyan and blue and has a lilac base. And lastly are the two mattes. There's a pastel lilac and a mid-tone grape purple. I found that these were a powdery buildable formula, which is my preference. They were pretty well rounded though. They weren't too dry. They blended well on dry eyelids as well as over a primer, and they lasted pretty well through the day. The next palette is the Grunge palette. This is a mostly matte palette with just the one shimmer. I think the mattes in this palette are different than in the quad. These are a little bit more velvety, less powdery. They are very, very soft. There was a lot of kick up, but they're very pigmented and they worked absolutely wonderful, blended beautifully, wore well on the eyes. First, I'll talk about the shimmer. It is a sparkly gold and it is extremely textured. If you have any kind of sensitivity to like a rougher texture on your eyes, you will not like this one. It reminds me of the Moonscapes from Divina, that same kind of rough textured formula. It is just as sparkly, just as high impact as those as well. However, again, it should be noted that these are definitely not friendly to people with sensory issues or with very sensitive eyelids. As I previously mentioned, the mattes are very velvety, very pigmented. The colors are those kind of like neutral adjacent rainbow colors, a little bit of red, a little bit of pink, some greens, grays, and browns. I think it's a really nice palette for anyone who likes a little bit of color but doesn't want to go full color. However, if you are using this as a full palette and not just as like a collection of singles the way that I am, you might want to have some kind of companion palette that has your shimmers unless you're just not really a big fan of shimmers. And lastly, I have the Neon Pastel palette. This is a matte only palette that has a very similar formula to the Grunge palette, that very soft, velvety, pigmented formula. I think they did a really good job formulating these. These kind of shadows can definitely be difficult to formulate, but I think they did a good job making them pigmented, but still high quality. They're not patchy, they're blendable. I think they did a really good job with them. I'm particularly impressed at the blue. I mean, just look how vibrant that is. All right, so that's it. That was my first impressions and swatches and little review of my first ever GlamShop haul. I did really like everything I got. I love the singles, not virtual pink. I really like this quad here. I'm enjoying playing with it. Overall, I liked all of the formulas except for the oily one. I really like the mattes. I love the neon and grunge. I think those have a beautiful formula and I can't wait to play with them more. So what do you think? Do you have any of these shades? Do you like these shades? Do you have any recommendations for the next time one of their international shipping events happens for me to pick up some more? I'd love to hear. Thank you for watching and hope you have a great day. Bye!